Hi, do you want to learn to fold this? Keep watching to find out how. Hi and welcome to Origami Expressions, a channel where we learn to fold things from the really simple to the complex. We also have a chat about various things that are going on in the world of origami and various different other origami related themes. In this video, we're going to fold this. It's called Siesta and it's by my favourite origami artist, Neal Elias. I actually recently taught this at the British Origami Society convention, so if you came along to my class, then thank you very much. Here's a video so you can remember how to fold it. If you didn't, then here's your introduction. I've actually folded a number of different Origami Elias models, and there's details of those on my website. I'll put the links in the description below. Before we get started, you might like to like and share this video. Please consider subscribing and ringing that notification bell so that you don't miss out on anything else coming up. Thank you. It is quite a complex model, so if you've not folded one of these before, then just be aware that it does involve a few complex origami techniques such as color changes and open sinks. If you're not familiar with those, you might want to consider doing some more simple models first. You can take a look at some of the other stuff I've got by viewing my simple origami playlist, which you'll find here. Having said all that, all you're going to need is one sheet of kami that's coloured on one side and not coloured on the other. I recommend a 30 centimetre piece of paper, so if you've got one of those to hand, let's get started. Okay, so to fold the Siesta by Neal Elias, you're going to need a square piece of paper. I recommend something that is 20 to 30 centimetres. I'm using a piece of paper that is 30 centimetres aside. And as you can see, it's coloured on one side and white on the other. Green would be ideal, but unfortunately I've run out of green, so I'm using this yellow that I think should show the creases up reasonably well. A piece of paper this size will produce a final model that stands around 15 centimetres tall and about 9.5 to 10 centimetres left to right. Now we're going to begin by folding a bird base, so if you know how to fold one of those, you can go ahead and do that and rejoin the video a little later on. If you're not sure how to fold a bird base, then we'll begin with that now. I would say that if you're not familiar with how to fold a bird base, then this probably isn't the model for you right now. There are a couple of sinks in this model and some color changes that you might find a little challenging. And I would recommend that you start with a more simple model. You can find a list on my website, or as I said in the introduction, there is a playlist of simple models as well. Nevertheless, I will try and explain it. So even if this is your first time folding a bird base and your first time folding this model, then let's see how we get on. So we're going to begin by folding the diagonals. Let's start by folding this point here down to meet this point here. That's this point here. We'll fold over to meet this point here, which will create a crease that runs from this corner all the way down to this corner. Now normally I recommend when you're making your folds that you fold away from you, because you tend to get a better quality of crease if you can lean over the top of the paper and fold away from you. Unfortunately my camera is in the way, so I can't do that, but what I'm going to do is, just in case my paper is not precisely square, I'm going to focus on the corners and let the center point of the paper take care of itself when we actually come to collapse all the folds of the base, or the first base, in together. So that's my recommendation that you do as well. Just focus on the corners at this stage, and then the rest of it will happen naturally. We can unfold that. Now we are going to fold this point here down to this point here. That's this top right hand corner. We'll fold all the way down to this bottom left hand corner, which will create a matching crease that runs from this point here down to this point here. Again, focus on the corners. The rest of what happens in the center will take care of itself in a minute. You'll see what I mean. So focus on getting It's nice, good, sharp point right into those corners there. So make sure the edge is lined up and crease as far as the centre line. Centre line I've got there from a moment ago. That's awfully out of position. Just bear with me while I adjust that. Try and keep these early folds as accurate as you can get them. The more accurate you can make certainly your initial folds, then the more accurate and tidier the finished model will be. Errors tend to increase as you go through the model's folding sequence. So you want to try and get these early ones nice and accurate. Unfold that. So we have the two diagonals. Let's turn the paper over. And the next thing we can do is fold a book fold. So we'll take this edge here and we'll fold it over to meet this edge here. That's this left-hand edge. We will fold over to lie along this right-hand edge, which will create a crease that runs through the center of the paper vertically, going through that central point. So again, I'm trying to make that nice and accurate. Like that. Notice that I'm using the back of my thumbnail. I'm not dragging it across because that would take the colour off the paper. I'm using the surface of my thumbnail, or you could use a bone folder or any other sort of plastic thing to flatten it down to get a nice straight crease, but avoid doing this with your thumbnail. Unfold that. And now let's turn the paper around by 90 degrees. And we can make the same fold again. Let's fold this edge here over to meet this edge here. That's this left-hand edge. We'll fold over to lie along this right-hand edge. That will again create a vertical crease down the center of the paper, and it will run through the central point where all the other creases are. This time, leave it folded. Now there are various ways of folding a preliminary base or a preliminary fold or a square base, depending on what your origami background is. It's all the same thing. This is one of my favorites, and it's certainly one of the easiest to teach. Okay, so we have the diagonals made on the white side of the paper and the book folds made on the coloured side of the paper. You can see I've reoriented the paper so that I have the folded edge towards me and the open edge away from me. Now if we lift it off the table and hold by thumb and forefingers on each side, you can rotate your hands together like that. Just rotate your hands together and you'll see that the 4 points will all come together. And you can lay that down with the same number of layers on each side and squash it flat. Before you do, just lift the top layer and make sure that you've got these points here really tightly lined up and that they line up with the bottom point underneath. So get those as accurate as you can, and once you're happy you've got that, place the top one in place, make sure that lines up, and now you can squash all those layers down. And that should all lie flat. Let's turn the paper around by 180 degrees. So now we have the single folded point at the top. We have two flaps on this side. We have two flaps on this side. And at this bottom point facing towards you, you have a top flap, two thinner flaps in the middle, and one underneath. Right, we're going to work on the top flap on each side for now. So we'll leave this bottom flap alone for the moment. We'll do some work on that shortly. But for the moment, let's just work on this top flap here. We'll take this edge and we'll fold it over to lie along the center line. That's this edge on the top flap only. We'll fold over to lie along the center line. And that will create a crease that runs from this point here and bisects this angle and goes up to about here. Like that. Let's do the same on this side. So we'll work on the top flap only. Take this edge here and fold it over to lie along the center line. It will match up with its matching counterpoint flap here. So that's this edge. We'll fold over to lie along the center line, which will create a crease that runs from this bottom point up to about here, where it matches what's going on this side. Try and get your creases at the bottom there nice and tight, good quality creases so that the edges match up down here. And you're going to want a good firm crease there. So now you can see you have this kind of kite shape on the top. We're going to fold this top point down as far as it will go without moving any of the other layers of paper down to about here. That's this top point here. We'll fold over to about here, which will create a crease that runs along the edge of these two flaps here. So see, I've just put that in, and now I will use the back of my thumb to make that a good firm crease. Let's unfold that again, and we'll unfold this one, and we'll unfold this one. So we're back at this point, only now we have this triangular shape in the middle. We're going to work on just this top layer. I'm going to move the paper slightly towards me so there's room on screen. We're going to fold on just the top layer of paper, this point here, all the way over to about here. That's this point here on the top layer only. We'll fold all the way over to about here, and it will crease along this fold line that you already have. We're not putting any new creases in at this stage. We're just going to use the ones we've made in the last few steps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top layer, I'm going to put my fingers inside just to hold the ones underneath in place, and I'm going to lift that top layer up so that it folds along this crease we've already got. And I'm going to lift it, start to push it forwards, and you can see that the sides want to fold themselves in. Oddly enough, along the creases that we've already got. You might need to help it at the top there, but you can see the sides are wanting to go together, and that diamond shape is naturally trying to happen by itself. So I'll just get my fingers out of the way, and we'll let that happen. And if the paper goes a bit tight on one side, just reinforce those creases that you've already got, and the whole thing will lie flat. Try and make sure that you actually get that crease goes in place properly, particularly at these corners here. If you do that, you'll find the whole thing will lie flat, and the edges should match up just as well up here as they do down there. And when you're happy with it, you can just squash that down and go over those creases again to make sure that you're happy with them. You should have this shape. Let's turn the paper over. Now we can do the same thing on this side. So we'll work on just the top layers, top flaps only on this side. And as we do, you'll find that the edges will line up with the ones underneath. So we'll start with, just as we did on the other side, this edge here folding over to lie along the center line. That's this edge here will fold over to lie along the center line. The crease line, or the fold line, will run from this point here up to this point here. And you should find that the edges will match up with the ones underneath. If you get a slight white shape appearing down here, it's not ideal, but don't worry about it if you do. There will be time to adjust for that later on. Let's do the same thing on this side. So we'll fold this edge here over to lie along the center line and match up with this flap here. That's this edge here will fold over to lie along the center line, and the fold line will run from this bottom point all the way up to this side point here. Again, you should find that the edges line up neatly with the ones underneath. Like that. Now we're going to work with this flap again, and just as we did before, we're going to take this top flap, this top point on this top flap, and we're going to fold it over as far as it will go, down to about here. That's this corner here. We'll fold over as far as it will go, down to about here, and the fold line will run along the model at its widest point across the top of these two flaps. Make that a good, firm crease. Then you can unfold that one again, unfold that flap and that flap, and we're back to this shape, but now we have this triangle in the middle which matches what we had on the other side before. So just as we did before, on the top layer only, we will fold this point all the way up to match up with this point now. That's the top layer only. This point will fold all the way up to meet this point, and it will fold along this crease line here that we have in place. Again, we're adding no new folds in this step. We're just working with the ones we've already got. So just like before, I'm going to lift the top layer. I'm going to put my finger on the layers underneath so that they don't move. I'm going to lift the top layer up so that it starts to fold along that crease line. Push it all the way towards the top, and you can see that the sides want to fold in. So we'll let that happen. Put my fingers out of the way. Push those sides down and help the paper just crease where it's supposed to. If you need to, work your way up and the whole thing will lie flat. Let's just reinforce those creases a bit. Okay. Now you should have one large flap on the top, one small flap in the middle, and another large flap on the bottom. And on the lower section, these two legs, if you like here, half flaps. That is a bird base. How are you finding it so far? If you're enjoying it, please consider liking this video, sharing it, and subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. Thank you. Back to the folding. So now that we have our bird base, we can get on with creating the model itself. So the first thing we need to do is just adjust the orientation of a couple of flaps. As we said before, we have the large flaps at the top and one smaller one in the middle, and here we have these kind of two half-width legs, if you like. Let's take the top flap, the top point on the top layer, and fold it all the way down to meet these bottom points. That's this point here. We'll fold all the way over to meet these points at the bottom, and it will fold along this crease line here. Like that. Let's turn the piece of paper over. Beg your pardon. And we can do the same thing on this side. So we will take this top point here and we'll fold it over to this point here. That's this top point here. We'll fold over to this point here. It will fold along this crease line here. So now we have one wider, shorter, thick point here and all the flaps down the bottom. 1, 2 in the middle and 1 underneath. 4. The next thing we will do is, again, we're going to work on the top layer only. We'll work on the one underneath a little later, but again, for the moment, we're just working on the top layer. Let's take this point here and we'll fold this point over to meet this intersection of creases in the middle of the paper. That's this point here. We'll fold over to these creases here, which will put a valley fold in vertically halfway between those 2 points. You're going to want that to be a good firm crease. So use the back of your thumbnail or a bone folder or similar to flatten that down, but make it a good firm crease. We can do the same on this side. So just on the top layer, we'll take this point here and we'll fold it over to meet these creases here and line up with its flap there. That's this point here. We'll fold over to these creases here and to meet this flap there. That will put a vertical valley fold in halfway between these 2 points. Again, make it a good firm crease. Like that. Now we're going to take both of these flaps and sink them inside the model. So we'll do that one at a time, and we'll start working on this flap on the left. This flap here we can move out of the way for the moment, and we'll just work with this one. So let's lift this flap up, and I'm going to open up this paper here at the bottom slightly so that I can get into this flap. So if we just lift bottom layers of paper slightly and open up this flap, we're going to need to find this triangle. Now, to sink the paper in this triangle of paper inside the model, we need all the folds around the outside of this triangle to be mountain folds. So this needs to be mountain fold, this and this needs to be mountain fold, and this needs to be mounting fold. Then you can see we have this crease here, here, and here. What I like to think of as the ribs of the triangle, they all need to turn into valley folds. So that will kind of happen automatically once we put the mounting folds in and we start to push the thing together. So let's start by just creasing these folds here that you can see in as mounting folds. And if I just go around that triangle, pinch those folds in, you should see that triangle a lot more clearly. There it is. So here are the folds we need to become valley folds. You'll find that this one will automatically become a mounting fold as well. But we'll do that. That will happen by default as we just put our fingers in the corner and start to work our way along those valley folds and push them in. Push that one in as well. And you'll see that we can just push against that one there to create the mounting fold we need. Make sure those valley folds do go all the way into the corners, and you should find that the whole thing will lie flat. Just reinforce those creases. Now you can see that that triangular section of paper has gone inside the model along the creases that we already had. Let's do the same on this side. So we'll lift up the paper so we can see what we're doing with it. Take the top flap at the bottom and just open that up, and here as well, just to reveal that triangle that we need to work with. Not open the whole paper up, you can see just that one side. Let's just pop that slightly so that you can see it. There's the triangle that we need. So you can see here's a fold, here's a fold, and here's a fold. We need all of those to be mounting folds, and this one, and this one, the ribs of the triangle, those are the ones that will become valley folds. So let's just pinch in these folds here as mounting folds. You can see that they are some of them mounting folds as we go around. Some of them are valley folds that just need to be turned back in the direction. That one already is a mounting fold, so that's that. Good. And this is the one we just need to pinch that in as a mounting fold, rather, beg your pardon. So right away into the corner. So there's the triangle. There we are. So just as we did before, we can push against these valley folds so they start to happen. Take your time over it. This might feel slightly uncomfortable, but just take your time over it. Work with the paper as you need to. This is the one that will automatically become a mounting fold, so you can just press against that as well. And you'll see that with a bit of help, just a bit of care, just work with it if you need to, the whole thing will lie flat. Just make sure that you've got all your edges still nice and tight and lined up, and you can just go ahead and reinforce all those creases a little bit. There we go. It's starting to look vaguely like the head of an elephant a bit, so you've kind of got these ears sticking out and what could possibly pass for a trunk there. But we're going to turn the paper over and do the same thing on this side. So we'll start by taking this point here on the top layer only. That's this point here, and we'll fold it over to meet this intersection of creases here. That's this point here. We'll fold over to these creases here, which will put a vertical valley fold in down here, exactly halfway between these 2 points. We'll also line up with the paper underneath, like that. You can see that these edges should line up. You're going to want that to be a good firm crease again. And we can do the same thing on this side. So we'll take this point here, we'll fold it over to meet this intersection of creases and line up with this flap. That's this point here, we'll fold over to this intersection of creases and line up with this flap, which will put a valley vertical fold in halfway between these 2 points. Again, you should find that your edges will line up underneath. And again, you're going to want a good firm crease there. Like that. Now we're going to do the same thing on this side of the paper, and we're going to take these two triangular flaps here and sink them inside the model. So we'll work with this one to begin with. Let's fold this out of the way, and we'll lift this flap up so we can see what we're doing. Again, I'm going to take the top flap at the bottom, I'm going to lift it up, and I'm going to reach inside that raw edge of paper there and just ease the paper apart so we can see this triangle. There it is. There's one side, another side, and a third side. We need those all to be mountains, and this, and this to be valleys. That one will become a mountain fold by default as we do it. So as before, just pinch in the mountain folds around the edge of the triangle. Like that. Make sure that one's in place, and just pinch this valley fold as a mountain fold. There we go, there's the triangle, nice and clear. Now we can start to push the ribs of the triangle inside. On all three sides. That fold there becomes the mountain. Make sure it goes all the way down to the point. And make sure your valley folds go all the way up to the points of your triangle, and the whole thing will lie flat. Right, you should be getting the hang of those by now. We've got one more to do, but I think we can go a little quicker this time. So, we'll lift the paper up, reach inside, find the triangle, and we can just pinch those creases as mountains. And then just push the ribs of the paper together, and the whole lot. Come on, a bit of encouragement. The whole lot will lie flat. There we go. That wasn't so bad, was it? Now the next thing we need to do is take this bottom point here on the top layer only. That's this bottom point here on the top layer only, and we'll fold that back up to where it was, about here, along this crease line here, like that. Okay, now we've got a couple more sinks to do. So let's start by putting the creases in place first. So you can see down here on the bottom half, we have these two kind of half-width flaps and the one for, full-width flap underneath. These two half-width flaps are made up of two edges here and four edges up here. So we're going to work on the top of these two edges here to begin with. We'll do some more stuff on the underlying layers later, but for right now it's just this top edge that we're going to focus on. And we're going to take that top edge and fold it over to lie along this raw edge of paper here between the two flaps. That's this folded edge here will fold over to meet this raw edge of paper. That will put a crease in between the bottom point and this point here. It doesn't matter if it doesn't quite match up here. It would be perfect if it does, but it needs to be there or thereabouts. Try and get a nice, good, sharp point at the bottom there. And if you do, you should find that your crease will run right into the corner. Again, you're going to want that to be a good, firm crease. Like that. Let's do the same thing on this side. So again, you can see that you have this half-width flap with two edges here and four edges up on the top half. We're only going to work on this top edge here, and we're going to fold that over to lie along the raw edge of the paper here. That's this folded edge here will fold over to lie along the raw edge of the paper here, and the crease line will run from this bottom point all the way up to this middle point here, and it will be a mirror image of what's happened on this side. Now I find it easier to turn the paper. I don't find it particularly easy to fold right to left, so I'm just turning the paper around so that I can put that crease in place. Then I will fold it back so that you can see what I have done. Like that. And I'm going to reinforce those creases with my thumbnail again. If you've got a bit of a gap at the bottom down here, don't worry, it's not the end of the world. We can work with that in a little while. Now we're going to need to take these triangular flaps and sink those inside the model. So we'll do the left-hand side first. Let's move this out of the way. And we can take this flap, lift it up, and up here we can open the paper out slightly, just there. And you can see this time it's a chevron shape. You can see that there is a long fold here, there is a long fold there, and there are two narrower folds on the inside of the flap. You can also see that there is this fold, and this fold, which are the ribs of the chevron that are going to need to become valley folds. The ones around the outside will all be mountains. So that's a mountain fold already, and you can see that that one's a mountain fold already. We need to turn this one into a mountain fold and this one into a mountain fold. As we do that, a lot of the work to reverse the direction of these ribs will happen automatically. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to start with this long one down the side. And I'm just going to go ahead and pinch that in as a mountain fold all the way up to that central point. And you can see that as I do, I'm just going to push against that point there and put that in as a mountain fold all the way down. Then let's work with these ones up here. So I need that to pop out slightly. There we go. So that one I can reinforce as a mountain fold. And this one, we can pinch that in along that valley fold that we've got. And now you can see the chevron shape starting to occur. All those mountain folds. Again, don't rush it. Work with the paper as you need to so that you get this shape. Then we can start to push those valley folds in a bit more than they already have gone. And that one as well. Should work all the way up. Just work with the paper as you need to make sure that your valley folds go all the way up to the 3 points. And you can see here's the mountain fold that we're going to need to be there. I'm going to want to make sure that that mountain fold goes all the way to that central point of creases there. So let's just help that to happen. Okay, that needs to go to there. And then we should just work with those. Yep, all the way up to there. And we should just be able to just squash all the layers of paper back, down, flat. Like that. Again, you want to try and make sure that you've got some nice points lined up here. If you do end up with some inaccuracies down here, it's not the end of the world. We can work with that at the end, but you want to give yourself as much accuracy as you can, so that you've got some wiggle room to work with at the end. But right now, let's just focus on getting that bit sunk inside. Now we can do the same thing with this flap on this side when you're going to sink this triangle in. So we can lift the flap up and open it out like that. I'm going to put my fingers in underneath this raw edge. I'm going to open it up slightly so that you can see the chevron. There's a mountain fold down here, there's a valley fold down here, and 2 folds at the top there. We need all of those to be mountain folds, and then this one, and this one will become valley folds. So again, I'm going to start with the long one. There's currently a valley fold, and I'm just going to pinch that in as a mountain fold all the way up. Like that. Make sure that one's nice and clear. And let's work on these top 2 here now. So one already is a mountain fold. We just need to kind of get the paper in the right position. And this one here, that there, that's the valley fold. We just need to prise the paper open a little bit and squeeze that in as a mountain fold. Like that. So there you are, you can see the chevron clearly now. There's a mountain fold, and there's those 2. These 3 we can work on now to make them all valley folds. I'm just going to push those in. There we go. Push that one in as well. And you can see that here is the mountain fold that we need to run to that point there. So I'm just going to put my finger in there. Just give it a bit of a push. Thank you. Don't rush it. Don't be nervous. Just keep working with the paper to make sure you get the creases that you need in at the pace that you need them to go in. And then when you're happy, you can bring all of that together and the paper will just squash flat. Like that. Now we will do the same thing with these 2 lower parts of these thin flaps here. So that's kind of this paper, but it's easier to do that from the top rather than trying to work when there's all of this other stuff in the way. So the first thing we'll do is we'll put a couple of creases in here. Now we're not going to sink these. This one is just a straightforward couple of valley folds. So we're going to fold this edge here over to lie along the center crease line and the raw edge of the paper. That's this edge here will fold over to the center crease line, which will put a fold in between this top point and this point here. That should feel pretty similar to what we've just done. Just like that. You'll see that this point here will continue to stick out at the side. Let's do the same thing on this flap. So we'll take this edge here and we'll fold it over to lie along the center line. That's this edge here, we'll fold over to lie along the center line. And that will put a crease in that starts at the top and runs down to this point here. Again, I find it easier to not fold from right to left, so I'm just going to rotate the paper around because I find that an easy direction for me to fold in. So I'm just going to put that crease in and I'll turn it back so that you can see what I've done. Again, try and make sure your creases are reasonably good at the top there. We can work with it towards the end if you need to make some adjustments, but it's easier to get things more right now than it is to try and adjust it later on. I've still got a gap there. That's better. Do as you're told. I'll run with it. Make that a good firm crease. Okay, that's all we need to do on that flap for now, so leave those alone, we're not going to sink those. Let's take these two half-width flaps at the bottom with kind of one thick bit and one thin bit. We'll fold both of those up to the top, that's both of these flaps here. We'll fold up to the top and they will fold along these crease lines here. So we can take one, fold it all the way up to the top, and take the other one and fold it all the way up to the top. Make sure you can get some good creases going on here. You've got quite a lot of paper in the center now, so it might start to feel a bit thick. Now I said earlier we're going to sink the thicker parts of these flaps as well, so we're going to do that now. So just as we did before, we'll take this edge here and we'll fold it over to lie along the center line. That's this edge here, we'll fold over to lie along the center line. That will create a crease that runs from this top point all the way down to this point here, and it will line up with the edges underneath. So make sure your edges line up, make sure that your top point is good, and when you're happy with it, you can go ahead and put those creases in nice and firmly. Now we can do the same thing on this flap here. So this edge here will fold over to lie along the center line. That's this edge here will fold over to lie along the center line and put a crease in between this top point and the middle here, and the edges will line up underneath. Again, I'm going to rotate the paper around because I don't really find folding in that direction as easy as it is folding in the other direction. Like that. Go ahead and make those good firm creases on both sides. Now you should be getting pretty familiar with how to do sink folds by now, or open sinks at least, so I think we can go slightly quicker on these. I'll still continue to talk you through it, but let's pick up the pace a bit for these two. So I'm going to fold this one out of the way, just work on this one. And I'm going to open up the paper, and there's the chevron, 1, 2, 3. So pinch the mountain folds in. That's being a bit awkward. That one. And that one. I'll get my fingers out of the way in a minute. There you go. And that one. Push the valley folds in the middle of the flaps in. Make sure that mountain fold there stays in place and that your valley folds go all the way up to the points they need to. Keep working the paper as you need to, and then when you're happy you've got it, squeeze all the paper together and it will all lie flat. Okay, just make sure they all line up. And now lastly this flap here. So open it up, find the chevron, okay, pinch that, fold in as a mountain, like that. Again for that one, making sure it goes all the way into the corner. Pop the valley folds in, and the whole thing will lie flat. Okay, let's just check the orientation of the paper. You have one large flap at the bottom. You have two flaps that we've thinned and now got a lot of edges at the top. And you have one thin flap at the top. And if you turn the paper over, you can see that pointing in the same direction as all of these flaps here, you have this one short, thick flap. Okay, let's turn that back over again. Actually, no, big problem. We'll have the paper on this side so that you've got this small flap here and it's facing towards the top. Let's fold the whole thing in half from left to right. So we're going to fold all the way down this central crease line, and this half of the paper will go over to this half. All the way along. Like that. And now we can reorient the paper by turning it round through 90 degrees. Like that. And I think we'll turn the paper over again from right to left, because this is the way round that I'd like to keep the paper while we're folding the rest of the model. Now, as you can see, we've got one flap on this side. That's going to become the little man who's having a sleep. And we've got three flaps on this side. That's going to become the cactus. And this flap bit sticking out here, which is going to become the base of the cactus. Now we need to start working on this flap. And we're going to put an inside reverse fold in to take this point here down to about here, so that this raw edge will inside reverse fold and line along here. So let's start by just putting the crease in to begin with, and then we'll create the inside reverse fold. This edge here has to lie along this edge here and come all the way down here, which will put a crease in starting at this point and bisecting the angle between these two edges. Which all sounds very complicated, but the long and short of it is fold that point down there. And you're going to want a good firm crease. Like that. Now we can fold that back. Now we start the inside reverse fold. So if we look here, we have 4 layers of paper on this flap on the left hand side. I'm going to go to the middle of those 4 and I'm going to open the paper up slightly. Now you can see we have a valley fold here, which we're going to use. We have a long valley fold along this underside of the paper, which will reverse its direction, hence why it's called an inside reverse fold, because the paper is going inside and this one will reverse its direction. And we have another mountain fold here, which will become a valley fold, but that will take care of itself by default. So we can work with this crease here. We'll take the flap and we'll get it to lie down exactly where it was before along that valley fold. So that goes down there like that. And you can see that the paper is starting to want to kind of fall back on itself. So let's just put that in place. We can bring the paper back to where it was, to close up the flap again, and the top section will want to fold down, and that edge there that I said will take care of itself will line up with the one underneath. That is an inside reverse fold. Now the next thing we need to do is kind of fun. We're going to do a color change. So if you look inside the inside reverse fold, you can see that there are 2 raw edges of paper running down the central crease. We have some yellow paper here with a raw edge and some yellow paper here with a raw edge. And we're going to want to take this layer of paper and we're going to wrap it round back on itself so it lies on this side. So we're not going to put any new creases in, we're just going to change the direction of a couple. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to open the paper up very slightly. Now you want to be careful because mine has already started to rip here slightly, and that's not good. So I'm going to have to kind of be careful with that for the rest of the model. But I'm going to open up that paper there, and being very careful I don't rip it any more there than it already is. I'm going to take that paper and I'm going to push against that point and that point. So just turn the paper inside out. You can see where I'm holding it to make sure it doesn't rip. And that will then lie down. And all of that will lie flat. Let's do the same thing on the other side. Turn the paper over. And when you look inside that fold now, you can see we've got a white edge, and that layer of paper that we had here is now on the other side. So we're going to do the same thing here. So I'm just going to open it up very slightly. I'm going to take that layer of paper and ease it out. I'm going to make sure that I hold here because that's where it will rip if I'm not careful. And I'm going to turn this point here and this point here inside out. So I'm just going to push against them gently, carefully, not to rip the paper, there and there. Make sure they go all the way inside out. Then you can put the creases back down as you were and lay the whole thing flat again. And that will all lay down exactly in the same place as it was before. If that's the first time you've done one of those, it'll feel quite nervy, and you can end up ripping the paper slightly, as I did on the other side, but I won't tell if you don't. So get some good creases in there. We'll turn the piece of paper back again because we want to have it round this way. Now the paper that is going to fold the little man who's asleep is currently facing the wrong direction. It's facing down here and we need to face up that way. So we're going to do another inside reverse fold so that this point here goes all the way up to about here. That's this point here will go all the way up to about here, and it will be an inside reverse fold along this hidden edge here. But the easiest thing to do first is to just put the fold in as a valley fold, and then we can inside reverse fold it. So let's just fold that up there. and create a good firm crease in there. Just make it better than that. Fold the paper back down. Then we can unfold that flap slightly and fold it back up along this crease line. And lay all the paper back down flat. I'm just going to make sure that that crease goes exactly where I want it to go. So try and keep your layers of paper right. Mine, I've got a bit of a ruck of paper in there that I'm just going to get rid of. There we go. And you're going to want to make sure that that edge of paper lines up here and lines up well against that middle point. Okay. Keep your edges all nice and good and clean and well pressed together. Right, do you remember that slight rip that I mentioned a minute ago? This is where we hide it. We're going to take this edge here and we're going to fold it over to lie along this edge here. So that's this edge here. We'll fold it over to lie along this edge here. So that will create a crease that bisects these two edges, for want of a better word, fold lines there. So that goes up. You want to try and get these to line up as best you can. And you want to make sure that it goes from this point here, but you've got a lot of creases there, so if you need to just give yourself a bit more leeway at that point down there, then you can. And when you're comfortable with it, just put that in as a good firm crease. Then we can turn the paper over. And we'll do the same thing on this side. So this point here will fold up to meet this point here. That's this point here will fold up to meet this point here. That will put a crease line that runs from this point here up to that point there. And this edge will line up with these edges here. Like that. Good firm creases. Now, in order to hold all this stuff in place, we're going to need to do something with this flap. So we're going to do an outside reverse fold, which will wrap around these 2 points up here. So this will become a valley fold on this side, and that will go up there, and it will still be valley fold on the other side. This small point at the bottom will stay exactly where it is. So let's start by putting a valley fold in here, just by taking this top layer of this flap, and we're just going to put our thumb and fingers inside and just crease a valley fold there. So you're going to want a good firm crease in there. So get your thumbnail in, just crease that valley fold there. Then we can turn the paper back over. And we'll do the same thing on this side. So we're going to want a valley fold here. So we'll just get our thumb inside there and work our fingers up and just put that valley fold in there. So it runs along the edge of these flaps here. Good firm crease in there. And now we just need to put both of those last 2 folds in at the same time. So the easiest way of doing that, so that this point here will go up to this point here and wrap around the both of them. Both of these valley folds will go in at the same time. See, the easiest way of doing that is to just lift the paper, open it out slightly, and just pop that large flap inside out, like that. And you can see there's that valley fold, and there it is on this side. So you just need to pop that paper round and keep going so it folds along those 2 valley folds. Be careful you don't rip the paper in the middle. and then you can just lie that flap down so that it wraps around the paper on this side, and it's wrapped around the paper on this side, and just get that to all wrap around together. Right, it doesn't matter if it's not a perfect match up at the top there, because we're going to do some work on those in a bit anyway, but you want to try and get that to wrap around reasonably well if you can. Let's work on the little man who's asleep asleep beside the cactus. So that's this flap here. The next thing we need to do is a crimp. Now the problem with this crimp is there isn't really much in the way of reference folds. Now on this 30cm by 30cm piece of paper, I want the crimp to start about 4.5 centimeters up along this central line. And I want to make it so that this edge here, when I fold it over, will come in at about a right angle, not necessarily exactly, but roughly speaking a right angle. And I want the paper to come close to this diagonal here, but not actually line up with it. So the easiest thing for me to do is to actually just show you where I want those creases to be, and then you can replicate that yourself. So if I get my ruler, just to show, I want that first crease to start about 4.5 centimeters up there. So from the bottom point, so somewhere around, just put my finger in there. So that's where I want it to start. And I'm just going to adjust the angle slightly. So I'm going to work from that point and start thinking about over here roughly where I want it to go. Now, as I say, I want it to come in from that point there. So I'm going to put a diagonal fold in. I'm going to start to crease it in gently because I want to try and find the other end of the crease. So it starts there, and you can see that I've roughly found it so that it's starting at this point here. I'm starting to fold in a crease very softly so that this edge will come in at roughly a right angle. So it's, yeah, somewhere around there. It's pretty good. Yep, that's starting in the right place. So that's probably about right. So you can see it's from that point, and I'm going to be making this edge here come in at roughly a right angle when compared to this edge here. So something like that. And I'm just going to crease that in. And then I want it to lay down at, I don't want this edge here to touch this diagonal point here. So let's just hold my fingers out of the way. This edge here that we folded in, I don't want it to touch this underlying diagonal edge. I want it to come close, but not to actually touch it. So something like that. You can see that I think I've got the point at where the angle of the paper changes to be, roughly speaking, lining up with the underlying fold. So that's not bad. So when I'm happy I've got that, I need to put the same creases in on the other side. So I'm just going to lift that up and I'm just going to mirror the creases on the other side. I should just do that and I can show you. So squeeze that in, that mountain fold on both sides, like that. And I'm just going to put that one down and squeeze this in place so you can see what goes on the other side. So that flap will be the same on both sides. So just help the paper ease it into place where it needs to go. So you can see where I've got the crease starting, about 4.5 centimeters up there. It's coming in at nearly a right angle, and this angle change there is, roughly speaking, lying on the line, the fold line that's underneath it. So about there. So you can see it's a crimp, and it looks the same on both sides. Now we've got another one to do, which doesn't really have any reference folds again. So we're going to want it to start about 2.5 centimeters along this line. So let's just mark that in. So it's about there. And I'm going to want it to be not parallel with this. So I'm going to be somewhere around, let's have something that's nearly a right angle between this edge and the underlying folded edge. So you can see that I've started it about 2.5 centimeters along this folded edge, so about there. And I've just moved the piece of paper so that it's roughly creating a right angle between this edge and that one. So we can put that crease in. Now this is going to be an outside reverse fold, not a crimp. So once we've got that, we can turn it into an outside reverse fold. So we'll lift that up and we'll just open the flap up like that. And I'm just going to open the flap up, pop that back on itself so that this valley here becomes a mountain and the whole lot will lie down on the crease line, creases that you've already got. Like that. Now we have another crimp to do. And this crimp we are going to make along this edge, this folded edge here, on this layer of the paper, but along this folded edge here. The crimp will start at this point here, the kind of base of that right angle, and it will run along here, so that effectively what we do is we just push the paper inside and swivel this bit round. So it will become clear as we do it. So let's just begin by taking this folded edge here and we'll just pinch in a mountain fold along this edge. So like, actually to be honest, the easiest thing to do is just do it as a valley fold to begin with. Like that. Fold that flap down, lift it back up. Now turn those folds into a mountain fold on both sides. So it is a mountain fold on one side already. Just needs to be a mountain fold on this side. Like that. So I've just pinched in a mountain fold along here. You can see it already is a mountain fold on this side. Just the position of it slightly. Like that. And you can see the paper started to open up. So you can already start to see this crimp starting to happen. It starts here and the crease line's going to go over there, and all we're going to do is we're just going to push that inside. Just going to push that layer there inside so that this mountain fold will happen and a valley fold will automatically form from the same place. And I just want to change the direction of this flap so that it goes, the head starts to face forwards rather than backwards. And you're going to do it to taste really. So I want something a bit like that. So I can see that it's not vertically, I've moved it further forwards than vertically, and I've just pushed it round to about there. And then when you've got that, you can squash it down flat. Let's have a look at that from both sides. So you can see that there's the creases we've just put in. That mountain fold went there. The valley fold is inside, and it looks the same on both sides. Now we've got another crimp fold to do. Again, we're a bit short on reference folds here. So the only real reference point we've got is this one. So what I'm actually looking for is to kind of change the direction of this. If you consider a triangle that starts here and goes to the base over this side of the flap somewhere. You've got kind of got a triangle, and I want that to go that way. And I want this edge to go through this point here. So this edge here has got to go through that point. So I shall just kind of roughly put it in. You can see what I'm going to want. So I reckon probably the same distance up here, or possibly slightly less on this side as well. So maybe I'm going to take about that much. And you can see I've pinched in a mountain fold that's slightly less than there is on this side here, up on that side there. I'll just pinch that in. And then we can bring it back round again so that the crimp starts at this edge, this point here, and the flap folds like that. I'll show you what I've done just by unfolding those. So we started the crimp on this side. Let's come up there, look. So you can see it's slightly less than the direction, that amount of length of that edge there. Slightly less than that is where I've said the crimp's going to roughly start there. And from that point and the widest point there, I folded it behind. And I've brought it back round again by creating a valley fold, so that this edge will then line up with that point. So about like that. Now we're going to want to crimp that inside, but actually you'll see that we can't do that because all of this paper here is all stuck together because of the outside reverse fold we did a minute ago. So you can't actually open that. So in order to actually create this crimp, we're going to have to open the paper here and open the paper here. So we can just start to see those creases there. You can see there is a mountain, a valley, a mountain, and a valley. And these are the creases we want. So that one there and that one there is what enables this flap to come forwards, and that one there and that one there is what forms the outside of the crimp. So let's put that fold, those folds in there. The other one will happen kind of by itself to an extent. So now we can let that crimp happen with a bit of help. Come on. Pinch that fold back in as well. There we go, look. So those folds both become mountains, and that one will become two valleys, and it will all go back together. And just reform those creases again, pull that together, push the head back inside that crimp. There we go. So you can see now you've got, this has gone in on both sides. Just reinforce those creases a bit. Now we actually need some of these bits of raw edges, like this layer of paper on both sides, out from there, but we can't get it out from there because it's stuck inside that crimp. So let's open that crimp up again a bit. So we'll open up that crimp there, open the flap up from the back so we can see that crimp that we've just made. And now we can take hold of this raw edge and this raw edge, that's this bit here and this bit here, and just pull them out. So my finger's in there, just lift that raw edge out. Come on, just squish it down, just about there. Do the same with this one here, just ease that out. It will come, pop, there you go. And then put that crimp back in. So that goes there, it folds up, we reform those arms, and now you've got this kind of yellow bit of paper that's just appeared, and it looks a bit like it's a kind of, the man's got a beak for a head. Now all this stuff here keeps coming unfolded, so we want to kind of stop that from happening now. We're done with all of that. So I'm going to put an extra crease in that goes from this point here, up to that point there, where this kind of change of direction. Just on the top layer only, I'm just going to put that in as a mounting fold and just push it inside, like that. You can see the mounting fold happening there. So all that does is, first of all, it stops all that paper from coming undone, and secondly, it forms his arms. So once you've got that roughly in place, you can pinch that in and then lay it down and make that a good firm fold, like that. Turn the piece of paper over and put the matching crease in on this side. So it's from this point here to that point there. You'll see the edges will line up underneath. So you're just looking to thin these arms slightly, and it should all nice and neatly line up with what you've got on the other side, like that. And when you're happy with it, just squash it down, like that. Turn it back over again, because this is the side that we're working on. That's going to be the kind of the finished side for the model. Let's finish the head off. So if we just kind of open this flap up slightly, just kind of, let's get in there, we can see if you open it up and keep opening, you can produce this kind of five-sided shape here. So 1, 2, 3, oops, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you want to expose that, and we want that five-sided shape. You want to lay it down flat so that five-sided shape lies flat. You're going to need to adjust the layers of paper as you need to, so that you can get that nice five-sided shape and the base of it will lie flat. So I'm just going to kind of put it down on the table and give that a bit of a encouragement to appear. You might need to just manipulate the paper a bit, just so you can get that nice flat five-sided shape. Now just adjust some of the layers if you need to make that lie underneath his arm. If you kind of need to, there we go. So I've just tidied those layers up. Now this is going to be his hat. You can see that you want a nice straight line there, because that's going to be the base of his hat. So we're going to put a pleat in. So that's going to start with a mountain fold at the widest point of this kind of this irregular five-sided pentagon. So put a mountain fold in between these 2 points at the widest side of it, and then we'll put another valley fold in after that will bring this point back visible again. So let's put the mountain fold in to start with. Let's turn the paper around, so it's this way, and just fold in a mountain fold between those 2 widest points, like that. And then you can see that you've got that folded down. We just need to bring this point back round to the front again to form the top of the little guy's hat. So you're looking for something, just stick it in a bit like that. So try and get the central creases to line up like that. If you need to just adjust your helmet, just adjust the guy's hat, just pull it a bit so that you get that nice hat shape, nice and defined. Reinforce your creases a bit if you need to. So that's this guy nearly finished. Well, there's one last little bit to do for him, but we'll do that in a minute. Let's work on the cactus. Now we've got 2 arms that we need to stick out on the cactus. So the first one we need to make sure come out this way. Now it's up to you whereabouts you make it happen. You could start it down here somewhere if you really want. I tend to think it looks nice somewhere around the top of the little man's head or little man's hat. So I'm going to make sure it sticks out at a right angle round about there. And we're going to use this flap here, the one that's wrapped round, to create that. And the easiest way of doing it, to be honest, is just to do it. So it's a question of take hold of the flap on both sides, ease it apart, and just pop it back in the direction. Just loosely like that, so that you can see it's, you make a judgment of where you want it. And when you're happy with that, yeah, I reckon it's going to be about there, then you can just turn this side into a mountain fold, like that. And just position that roughly where you want it. I think it should stick out either a right angle or maybe slightly less. And when you're happy with that, just pinch it back in. I reckon something like that's good. So there we go. Now you want the cactus arm to face back up towards the sky, so that it's roughly parallel with the central part of the cactus, and it needs to be reasonably close to the actual central part of the cactus. These things tend to be stick up more like here, not out here somewhere, so you need to think about it being more like that. So just kind of bend it up where you want it, so something like that. Yeah, I think that looks good. So we'll put a good firm crease there. There we go, a good firm crease. And we're going to turn that into a outside reverse fold. So we'll move that back down, and we'll outside reverse fold this point up to here. That's this point up to about here, using the creases that you've just made. So we'll do that by opening the paper, popping that back in the other direction, like that, and we'll allow this fold here to take place. We'll change the direction of the one underneath it so that it matches. Put your finger inside there if you need to, and squash the whole thing flat. Maybe adjust the direction of the flap if you need to, so that you're roughly happy with it. Like that. Now we can turn the model over. And the reason why we turn the model over is because we want to do we want to leave the central part of the cactus visible from the other side. And the change of direction we're going to make to the arm on this side, we want to be on the back. So that's why we're doing it from this side. So again, it's going to be a reverse fold, an inside reverse fold this time. And I reckon we're going to take this flap and move it facing out in this direction, maybe about halfway, maybe between this sticky out part of this arm of the cactus and the top of the cactus. So something like, let's just put a crease in just for kind of so we get an idea of what we want. So maybe something like that. Yeah, I think that was good. Maybe it's a little less. There. I think that's good. I'm going to make it not quite such a right angle either, so make it slightly more angled. And we're going to put a good firm crease in there. There we go, and we can lift that back out of the way. And we'll put that in as an inside reverse fold. So let's look for the middle of all of these layers of paper there. So you've got 2 layers of paper on each side. It's there. And when you found the middle, then you can open it up, and you can see there's a valley fold here. That mountain fold will become a valley fold automatically, and we just need to change the direction of that one. So let's just move that back out along the direction of where we want that flap to go. change the direction of the central part of the flap and squash this layer down to meet it. You don't need to worry about kind of flattening all this down yet, because we're going to change direction again. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to kind of, it's easy to just kind of squeeze it in place to do it. We're going to want this edge, again, much as we did on this side, to face up towards the top of the cactus. And the easiest way of doing it, frankly, is to just take your thumb and finger and bend it up in the right direction and squash it back down the way you want it, as an inside reverse fold. Now, when I said earlier on, quite near to the beginning of this model, that you can tidy the edges up if you want. Now, you can tuck the tips of each point of the cactus down inside if you wish. I'm not going to bother, I think it's fine, but you can just tidy up these tips by just pushing them down inside. Let's turn the model back over. And we'll do the last 4 folds, 2 of the same type. The first thing to do is we're just going to sort out this little guy's legs. We've got this ugly right angle here that we don't really want, so we're going to get rid of that. And the way we're going to do that is we have this diagonal folded edge. We're going to lift that up and fold it over to lie along this folded edge. So that's this diagonal flap, this diagonal folded edge here will fold over to lie along this central folded edge. That will create a crease line that runs from this point and down to the bottom edge, bisecting that angle. As we do, all of this stuff will start to lift up and we'll do some interesting things with it. So let's worry about that in a minute. Let's just start by getting our fingers inside here and just open that out. Your finger right inside. Just lay that folded edge down there. So you can see that this is all lifted up. Now this is a kind of to taste. Make sure you get that fold go right down to the bottom. This is kind of to taste, and I reckon I'm going to lay that down somewhere about, get that fold in there, just give me a minute. Somewhere around there. You can see that all I've done is that was sticking up and I've just moved it so that that edge is just a slightly, so this point here doesn't touch up with the guy's hands, just to create a bit of an angle there. That's fine. And we'll do the same thing on the other side, so let's turn that over. And we'll make this side match. So this diagonal edge will need to fold over to meet this folded edge. That's this diagonal folded edge will fold over to lie along this folded edge, and all of this stuff will start to lift up. So we'll just start by putting a finger in there, right the way down in there, and lift that folded edge and move it over to lie along the center line, like that. And you've got all this stuff which is lifted up here. We can just match it up with the layers underneath and squash the whole lot down flat. Get some good creases going on there. Okay, 2 last folds to do, which is just to tidy up the base of the cactus, really. Now, we've got this kind of ugly shape here. Now, there's various different things you can do with this. You can kind of stick your finger inside and maybe bend that down there. Or you could bend it down a little bit, just at the tip. What I like to do is just put a crease in, a mountain fold, just tuck this point here inside. But I'm not going to start it at this point, and I'm not going to finish it at this point. I'm just going to be kind of from somewhere near here to somewhere near there. It's kind of whatever you think is about right, really. Something like that. I'm just going to pinch that in some mounting folds, and then I'll hold up a little closer so you can see what I've done. And then make the other one match it underneath. So I'm just going to bring that round to the front there and tuck it in. And make it just so that it lines up and matches. It doesn't need to be perfect. This bit's just about to taste really, and making a more interesting shape at the front there. And then when you've got all that, just reinforce your creases a bit, tuck the arms in if you need to, and there is the completed Siesta. And there we go. I hope you were able to follow along and successfully make your own. If you did get stuck, then please let me know in the comments below and I'll do my best to help out. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. As I said earlier, it really does help and the algorithm needs some love too. You can find more information on my folds, things I like folding, and other models of a similar vein on my website, origamiexpressions.com, or you can find me on Instagram. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.